what is the root cause of your procrastination, of your distraction? The root cause is an emotion dysregulation problem. You don't have a moral failing. Society isn't trying to addict you. There's nothing wrong with your brain. It's simply you don't have a skill. So the solution to that...
Welcome back to the channel. If you're new, the idea with the channel is to help you optimize your life with every video. So if that sounds interesting to you, then consider subscribing. Today, I'm interviewing Stanford productivity expert, Nir Eyal. He's also a best-selling author of 2 books, Hooked and Indistractable. And he's been featured in the New York Times, Harvard, and he's also been on podcasts like Diary of a CEO, so maybe you've seen him before. A lot of his work is about how companies make habit-forming products, like especially social media companies who want to make their products more addictive. And he's also written a lot about how you can use those same ideas to take control of your attention in life. In the podcast, we talked about the problem of infinite scrolling and how sometimes it's really hard to not just fall into a social media rabbit hole. It's definitely happened to me multiple times in the past, but as it turns out, there's a simple 4-step process that anyone can do to take control of your attention and stop infinite scrolling today. So I'm sure you're going to find this as helpful as I did. As always, there are timestamps throughout the entire video if you want to skip around, but let's get it. Also, before we get started, I wanted to share that the production of this video was sponsored by Notion. I've used a product for almost 5 years now as a way to track all of my projects, especially when it's too complex to do through analog mediums. When I first started this YouTube channel, I used Notion, and I still use Notion as a way to track my upload schedule, plan out my videos, store scripts, research, and to capture any inspirations that I have. Notion is what I found to be one of the simplest, no-friction ways to keep track of complex projects, whether that's for school, business, or personal habits. I've used it to track my spending, subscriptions, marathon training, and even building my website. I have a few databases where I take notes on different books or videos that I've seen, which is now even more powerful since they introduced Notion AI. I can use it to summarize my own notes or even generate new ideas. So if you have a project that you're working on or something you want to keep track of digitally, you can definitely bring it to life with Notion. Check out some of their new features in the description link. It really helps out the channel, but let's get into the podcast. All right, Nir, can you give us a quick background of who you are and where you're at today?
Sure, absolutely. So I am dialing in from sunny Singapore. I live here. I've been here for about 4 years. And before that, I lived in New York. And before that, I lived in San Francisco. Before that, I lived in Palo Alto, where I taught at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and later at the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. And I specialize in what I call behavioral design. So how do we understand the psychology behind why we use certain products and services? And so my first book was called Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products, which was meant to be a cookbook for the brain in many ways, so that companies can figure out how to get people to use the products and services that they make out of habit, not because they have to, but because they want to. So the idea was, how do we steal the secrets of Silicon Valley, the Metas, the TikToks, the Slacks of the world? How do we steal their secrets and use them in products that help people build healthy habits? So Duolingo is a client of mine that used the Hook model to get people hooked to language learning. Fitbod uses the Hook model to get people hooked to exercise. That's who I wrote the book for, because the social media companies, frankly, they already know these techniques. They've known them for much longer than my book has been around. And so I wanted to democratize those techniques. Now, the flip side of building habit-forming products that build good habits is that we also want to break the bad habits to products that can distract us. And so that was the genesis of my second book, Indistractable. And that's all about how can we make sure that we put these potential distractions in their place so that we can get the best out of these tools without letting them get the best of us.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the Hooked model for how companies make these habit-forming products. But first with Indistractable, how does somebody actually become indistractable, and what does that word mean to you? I know you came up with that word for the book, but could you explain the philosophy behind that?
Sure. So becoming indistractable is simply about doing what you say you're going to do in all aspects of your life. So for me, I found that I said I was going to do one thing, right? I'm going to work on that big project and I'm not going to get distracted. And then 30, 45 minutes later, I'm still procrastinating. I would say I was going to exercise. I said I was going to eat right, but I didn't, and I wouldn't. I was going to be fully present with my daughter, and yet somehow I found myself still checking my device. And so it was a very personal problem for me because the price of progress, the price of living in a world with so many interesting things in it, is that oftentimes we go off track. Our attention slips away from us. And so I really wanted that for myself and for my daughter to have the kind of the skill set to be indistractable. So indistractable means you do what you say you're going to do. It doesn't mean you don't slip off track from time to time, but the difference between a distractible person And an indistractable person is that an indistractable person knows why they got distracted so they can do something about it. So Paulo Coelho has a wonderful quote. He said, "A mistake repeated more than once is a decision." Such a good quote. A mistake repeated more than once is a decision. So distractible people keep getting distracted over and over again, and they don't do anything about it, right? How much can we complain that YouTube and Facebook are distracting us? Okay, got it. Now, what are you going to do? Or are you deciding to be distractible? So an indistractable person says, okay, I see why you got me there, distraction. It happened once, but I'm not going to let it happen again. I'm going to make sure I take steps today to prevent getting distracted tomorrow. And then in terms of how do we do it? Well, that's a longer conversation, right? That's why I wrote the book. Basically, I'll summarize the 4 basic steps, and then we can dive into whatever's most interesting to you. But the 4 big strategies are to master internal triggers. Turns out that the vast majority of distraction does not originate outside of us, but rather begins from within. And this is a very common misconception. We think, well, if I just install the right app blocking service, or if I just, grayscale my phone, or if I turn my notifications off in the right way, well, then that'll fix the problem. It never does, because distraction is much more than just what's happening outside of us. It starts with what's happening inside of us. So realizing, why do we get distracted? Why do we go off track? It is fundamentally an emotion regulation problem. It's that we don't know how to deal with uncomfortable sensations like boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety. If we don't address the root cause of the problem, whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, we are always going to find something to take us off track unless we know why we want to escape reality and these uncomfortable sensations with some kind of distraction. So step number 1, master internal triggers, or they become your master. And of course, I'm happy to talk about nuts and bolts and how you do that. Step number 2 is make time for traction. Here's the fact. You can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So most people have a big open white space calendar with nothing on it, and they complain about how distracted they've been. Well, if you don't plan out what you're going to do, you can't say you got distracted, because what did you get distracted from? So I teach people in the book exactly how to turn their values into time. That's really how we live out our values, is to turn our values into time. The third step is to hack back the external triggers. So unlike internal triggers that are about 90% of our distractions, about 10% of our distractions do begin from the pings, the dings, the rings, all of these things in our outside environment. And so I show you step by step what to do about email, what to do about meetings, what to do about Slack channels that can cause these external triggers that can take us off track. So that's step number 3. The fourth and final step is to prevent distraction with pacts. A pact is a pre-commitment device. It's when we erect some kind of barrier, some kind of firewall to prevent us from getting distracted as the last line of defense. So that's a very, very quick 30,000-foot overview. The idea isn't to do everything I say in the book. No one does everything I say in the book, not even myself. The idea here is to give you a menu that you can choose from to make sure you do at least one thing from each of these 4 categories. That if most people focus on one or the other, they figure out how to grayscale their phone or some stupid stuff like that, which doesn't actually work. But then they haven't looked at the holistic picture of why we get distracted. So the idea here, as long as you do one thing from each of these 4 strategies, master internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, and prevent distraction with packs. As long as you use that as your roadmap, you are well on your way to becoming indistractable.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen into that trap of trying to find these little optimizations of changing stuff around my phone. But do you think for some people that might actually be the solution to quit entirely? Cold turkey?
Yeah, quit what is the question? Tell me specifically.
Yeah. I guess one specific habit that a lot of people have is infinite scrolling.
Yeah.
How can you break infinite scrolling?
Yeah. So for many people, I wonder if that's really what they want to do. Because and if they do, why do they want to do that? It's not the tool itself, right? There's this, I think that there's this silly notion that somehow, social media is like cigarettes and it's harmful, and it can be, right? If we overuse it, it's harmful because of what it comes at the cost of. It comes at the cost of real life interactions at the expense of virtual interactions. But that's the problem with any form of media. If you read too many books, if you watch too much television, if you listen to too much opera, it doesn't matter. It's about what it is displacing. What is it coming at the cost of? So there's nothing inherently unhealthy about scrolling. right? I'd much rather people scroll than smoke a cigarette or, drink booze or do a lot of other unhealthy behaviors. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. Why is scrolling on Instagram somehow morally inferior to watching golf on TV? I don't know. Can you tell me what's the difference?
Because some people feel like it's the company's fault that they're making the platforms more addicting. Like, for example, like short form video where it's like junk food.
But what's the harm? What's the harm?
Yeah, I guess like some people might say like cheap dopamine. Would that, do you think that?
Okay, but what's the harm? What's the net result? Okay, so if I smoke cigarettes, I'm going to get cancer.
Right.
If I scroll, what happens? What is the cost? What's the price?
Yeah, like not being able to do the things that you want to do because you're scrolling.
Right. Exactly. It's an opportunity cost. I pay with my time.
Yeah.
But I can pay with my time with all kinds of stupid shit. Right?
Yeah.
Like if I watch 4 hours of golf or 4 hours of internet scrolling, what did I pay? What was the cost? It was the same cost. It was my 4 hours of life. So it doesn't matter that the social media companies are using psychological manipulation. All media companies use psychological manipulation. Go on to ESPN.com or the New York Times or CNN, and they're also using psychological manipulation. Of course they are. Do we not know that? We all know that. But we have to be honest about what is the cost. So it's not about the behavior itself. We need to stop moralizing and medicalizing and vilifying the behavior and realize it's all right. You want to scroll? Scroll.
Yeah.
But do it according to your schedule and your values, not someone else's, certainly not the tech companies. So the solution to that is to use this model of Indistractable to figure out how I can do so in a way that serves me as opposed to me serving the media company. Now, how do you do that? You start with understanding what is traction and what is distraction. They're opposites, right? The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. Obviously, look at the word traction, distraction. Traction is anything you say you're going to do in advance with intent. So if you say, hey, I'm going to spend an hour scrolling on Instagram or wherever, whatever you like to do, and that's what you said you were going to do ahead of time, and it's on your schedule, do it. Don't feel guilty about it. Enjoy, right? Like this is what makes life worth living. You need things that are fun to do. So whether it's a video game or watching golf or, who cares? As long as that's what you said you were going to do it without guilt. Now, anything else that is not what you said you were going to do is a distraction. Okay, as opposed to traction. So even, if you said to yourself, I am going to watch YouTube videos because I love this guy, Eric, who makes amazing YouTube videos. So I'm going to watch his YouTube videos for an hour. If you put that on your calendar and now you go start checking email for work or do something else that you thought, feels productive, well, now that is a distraction because it's not what you said you were going to do in advance.
Yeah, I guess like kind of tie into procrastination. Like why do humans procrastinate? Is it just because they haven't set a like implementation intention of what they're going to do?
Well, so that's part of the solution set, but let's back up a little bit and ask ourselves, well, not only why do we procrastinate, why do we get distracted, but why do we do anything and everything? What's the seat of human motivation? And it turns out that the way most people conceive of motivation is incorrect. It certainly was for me. I, like most people, used to believe in this dichotomy of carrots and sticks. Right? That everything we do is about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. That is not actually true. Neurologically speaking, when we look inside the brain, we realize that it's not about carrots and sticks, but rather everything we do for only one reason. And that reason is to escape discomfort. Everything you do. The carrot is the stick. Does that make sense? The carrot is the stick, meaning the way the brain gets you to do something, even the pursuit of pleasurable sensations, is by making you feel uncomfortable. Think about it. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, right? All of these sensations spur us to do something, even to pursue pleasurable sensations. Hunger, lusting, desire. These are things that make us feel bad in order to get us to get something that's going to make us feel good. The brain doesn't do what feels good. The brain does what felt good, right? Where we have a memory and association about what can get us relief. So the reason we have hunger is to go pursue something to eat. Right? The reason we have lust, the reason we have desire is to go pursue that thing that we crave. So even the pursuit of pleasure is psychologically destabilizing. So what that means, therefore, if all human behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort, that must therefore mean that time management is pain management. I would go even further and say money management is pain management. Weight management is pain management. So this is the thing that I think most people gloss over, and they go straight for the life hacks and the tips and the tricks. And that's all nice. That has a place. But if you don't first address what is the root cause of your procrastination, of your distraction, and if you don't realize that the root cause is an emotion dysregulation problem, it's that we just haven't learned how to deal with discomfort. You don't have a moral failing. Society isn't trying to addict you. There's nothing wrong with your brain. It's simply you don't have a skill. We don't have the skill for how to deal with emotional discomfort in a healthy way. So what most people do, they escape that discomfort, right? Whether it's too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, you look for a way to escape that discomfort. But if you realize, hey, the source of the problem is that I don't know how to deal with boredom, loneliness, anxiety, uncertainty, what are the tools I will use when I feel that discomfort so that I make sure it propels me towards traction rather than trying to escape it with distraction? When you have that skill set, now you can layer on all those other life hacks and tips and tricks. But the first place to start to tackle procrastination distraction is always figuring out how do you deal with the source of the emotional discomfort, or else none of the other stuff will work long term.
So how do you actually deal with that emotional discomfort? Like, for example, with time management, like let's say on my calendar, I put in like 8 to 9 p.m. I'm going to be reading a book, but then 8 p.m. rolls around and I'm still watching YouTube, which I scheduled from 7 to 8. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to watch like a few more. And then now it's 9. So how could I have like prevented that?
Absolutely. So we want to look at all 4 steps. Okay. So step number 1 is, what is the emotion around the next task? So you said you were watching a movie or something, and then time on your calendar said to do what was it that you wanted to do?
Yeah, like YouTube video to read a book. But then YouTube video is so much more stimulating and engaging than reading the book.
Yeah. Do you enjoy reading the book?
Yeah.
Okay. So is there an emotional discomfort around reading the book, or that might not be the problem? Like, it's not like, we're not talking about a textbook here, right?
No, I think it's just like a book that I bought and I want to read. But sometimes it's like the video is too interesting, or like the movie is not done yet.
Okay. Great. So remember how I said you need all 4 steps? Because when you analyze all 4 steps, you can figure out where's the problem. So in this particular case, it may not be an emotion regulation problem to do the next task. It may be one of the other 4 things. So for example, when I'm writing, that's really hard work. And I have to work on the emotion that while I'm writing, all I want to do is go, Google something or check email, right? That would be an example of or like procrastinating on a task that you need to do. Yeah. That's where you want to deal with the internal trigger of discomfort. But in this case, you have 2 things you like. You just have the inertia of what you're currently doing. That's the problem. So let's go to step 2. Step 2, you said you made time for traction. You had it on your calendar. This is my reading time. Great. Okay. Now the external triggers. Okay. The pings, the dings, the rings that you happen to have. It sounds like that's not the problem in this particular scenario, because you're already, you're watching YouTube videos, but you want to do the other thing. So you already have, you're in the situation. Maybe the internal trigger is if you told me, hey, I keep scrolling from one video to the next, I can't stop. Well, then that might be a place where you hack back the external trigger. Very simple solution for that. There's a wonderful Chrome extension called YouTube DF that you use with your browser. And it removes, all those videos on the side, and the video that says, okay, watch this video next. It scrubs all that stuff out. So that would be an example of hacking back the external trigger. You can hack their product, right? YouTube is designed to get you to watch the next video, the next video, the next video. Well, we don't have to be passive about this. We can hack back the product and use it the way we want to see it. So for me, I don't see all those external triggers. So that might be something that might be helpful. But it sounds like, hey, you're watching a movie or something on YouTube or Netflix, and you want to keep watching it. So that might not be the problem. The 4th step, I think, is where we find an opportunity here, which is where you make a pact. Okay, what is a pact? A pact is a pre-commitment that you decide in advance where you have, a problem in place here. So what you could do, for example, Eric, if I told you that if you don't start reading your book at the time you said, whatever it was, 8 p.m., that's your book reading time. If you don't do that 5 days this week, in that scheduled time during your weekdays, if you don't do that, you're going to have to pay me $10,000. Are you going to read that book?
Yeah. Yeah, for
No
sure.
doubt about
Yeah.
it. No doubt about it. You're going to do it,
Yeah.
right? So we've already established you can. Because most people, when they think about this type of situation, they say, I can't stop watching the YouTube video. It's so engaging.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of what you said.
Yeah.
Right? I just like it so much. It's so engaging. So we've established you can. So we need to throw out that vocabulary of I can't, or it's the video's fault. It's not the video's fault. We've agreed you can. Now we're just negotiating the price.
Yeah.
So something that might be very useful is to have some kind of pact. You could use a price pact. For example, you can make a bet with me that you're going to pay me whatever amount of money if you don't do what you say you're going to do. So this is actually how I finished my book. I made up a $10,000 price pact with my buddy Mark that I would finish this book on a particular day. Okay. Another thing you could do is to have an effort pact. And an effort pact is where there's some bit of friction in between you and the mindless behavior to insert a bit of mindfulness in that moment. Okay. How would that work? So there's some wonderful free apps. There's an app called Cold Turkey that will turn off access to certain websites at any time of day or night you set. So you could get this app. I think it's free or very, very cheap. And you could say, hey, from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., that's my book reading time. Turn off YouTube. Don't give me access to YouTube. Every day that I say on my calendar is my reading time. So you've made that pact. Now, could you still go see that video? Of course. You could take out your phone. You could use a different computer. You could find a way. But the point is you're inserting a bit of friction. You're bringing awareness because you say, oh, I can't do it now. The internet's going to shut off at 8 o'clock and I'm not going to be able to use YouTube. Maybe that's time for me to do what I say I'm going to do instead. But again, it's about these 4 steps in concert to diagnose, okay, where's the problem and how do I fix it?
Would you say creating a pact is a good way to get yourself to be motivated to do something when you don't feel like it? Like you talked about writing and how that's something very difficult and there might be a lot of inertia to get started. How do you get motivated to write when you don't feel like it? Besides having a friend and saying, I'll pay you $10,000.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's where, so if there's an activity, so you giving me a scenario where you have 2 things you like, right? You like reading and you like watching YouTube videos. So the internal trigger is not the problem. If the internal trigger is the problem, in the case of I don't like to write, or I don't like to do my work, or I don't like to exercise, but I know I want to, it's part of my value system. It's part of what I need to do to become the kind of person I want to do. Then we need a little bit of a different strategy. Then we need to figure out what will I do when I feel that discomfort? What's the tool in my toolkit that I say, okay, I see what's going on here. What do I do when I don't feel like it? And so it's not about necessarily boosting motivation. It's about dealing with discomfort. It's about having a practice in place. So for example, writing is really freaking hard. Okay. I've written 2 bestsellers, sold 1 million copies. I've written thousands of blog posts. And let me tell you, it never becomes easy. It never becomes a habit because the definition of a habit is a behavior done with little or no conscious thought. I don't know how to write with little or no conscious thought. I don't know how to exercise with little or no conscious thought. If you're trying to get better at something, it requires conscious thought. How do you meditate with little or no conscious thought? There's no such thing as a meditation habit, a writing habit, an exercise habit. That doesn't work that way. Habits are behaviors done with little or no conscious thought. So it's not about putting things on autopilot, quite the opposite, right? It's about bringing greater awareness to dealing with the discomfort and having an arrow in your quiver to say, I see what's happening here. It's a feeling. What will I do in response to that feeling? And there's a dozen different things you can do in the book about reimagining the task, the trigger, your temperament, all kinds of things you could do. I'll give you just one very practical tip. When I'm writing, and this is something that happens almost every day, to be honest, because writing is always hard, is one, not expecting it to be easy. I think part of the BS around habits these days is that you can put everything on autopilot. Everything can be a habit. That is simply not true. And because I think it's so dangerous because people think, hey, if it's not easy, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe there's something broken in my brain. No, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken. Certain tasks will always be difficult, but that's the point, right? So let me make this concrete. So for me, when I'm writing and it's really hard and all I want to do is go watch a YouTube video or go check email or go do something else, I use what's called the 10-minute rule. And the 10-minute rule says that I can give in to any distraction, but not right now. in 10 minutes. Okay. So my job is to take a step. Okay. Take a deep breath. And after I set that timer for 10 minutes, I have a choice to make. At any moment within those 10 minutes, I can get back to the task at hand whenever I'm ready, or I can surf the urge. Surfing the urge acknowledges that these sensations, that these emotions, they crest and then they subside. They don't last forever. So that discomfort of, I'm bored, I'm anxious, I'm uncertain, I don't feel like doing this right now, that's just a temporary feeling. It's just like a wave. So you've got to surf that urge. So one technique, and again, there's dozens in the book, one technique I use is having a mantra. And my mantra, when I don't feel like doing a certain task, like writing, for example, I take a deep breath and I repeat this mantra. You can copy this mantra. You can make your own. Mine is, this is what it feels like to get better. This is what it feels like to get better. And so simply having that mantra for just a few seconds reminds me that it is the fact that this is difficult. It is the fact that I don't feel like it that means that this is important and other people can't do it. Right? And that gives me the motivation. That reminds me that I can use that internal trigger like rocket fuel to propel me towards traction. And then when I'm ready, I get back to the task at hand. And I would say 99% of the time, by the time those 10 minutes are up, I'm right back at work. And so what you're doing is you're increasing your personal agency. You're showing yourself, you know what? I can do this. I can do it. And if the 10-minute rule is too long, that's fine. Make it a 5-minute rule, a 2-minute rule. But what you're doing over time is you're saying, yeah, I can do this. 10 minutes becomes 12 minutes, becomes 20 minutes. And you're proving to yourself that these things don't control you. I think many of us, we have this pattern that we think, oh, if I don't feel like it, I don't do it. I don't feel like it, I'll check email. I don't feel like it, I'll scroll Instagram or whatever. As opposed to teaching yourself, okay, it's just a feeling. Just a feeling. And those feelings come and go. That's the kind of practice that can teach us to master these internal triggers so they don't become our masters.
I kind of have a question kind of specific to writing, because even with me making YouTube videos, I have to learn how to write these videos. And I want to ask, how do you actually overcome things like writer's block? Because I found it kind of difficult sometimes to schedule my calendar, write for 2 hours and then actually sit down and actually have something creative that I can write about. So do you ever find that it's hard to schedule time to be creative, and does scheduling time make it harder to be creative?
How do you measure yourself? How do you know if you had a good 2-hour writing block?
If a bunch of text was written after 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your mistake. You're measuring output,
right,
not input. Okay, this is super important. You're measuring output, not input. Output is how many words on the page.
Yeah.
But that's not the metric of success, because you don't always control that. Sometimes it just doesn't come. It happens to me too, right? I've been writing for well over a decade now. Sometimes I sit down, I got nothing. But that's not how I measure myself, because I don't fully control that. What I can control is the input. I don't control the output. I control the input. Now, over time, I will control the output. Right? If I consistently put my butt in the chair and give myself the input, make the input available. By the way, what is the input? For knowledge workers, for people who are writers or tech professionals or any white collar worker, what is your input? Your input is just two things: your time and your attention. That's it. That's all we got. Our time and our attention. That's the input in order to make the output. So if I consistently give myself the input of time and attention, the output will come. It might be variable, right? One day I make a lot, one day I make a little. It's going to be up and down. But if I consistently put my butt in the chair and don't measure myself by how much output I make, but rather, did I give myself the input, meaning, was I here paying full attention, not distracted, and giving myself the time to work on whatever it is I said I was going to work on for as long as I said I would? As long as I said I would. Now, maybe 2 hours is too much. Maybe it's too little. Maybe you will do this thing or that thing. That's not the point here. It's not about how much time you put in. It's about whatever you said you would do. So if you say, look, I'm going to write for 30 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, it's not how many words. It's, did I do what I said I was going to do for as long as I said I would without distraction? That's it. That's it. And it turns out over time, if you can consistently have that practice, not beat yourself up, oh, I didn't write enough words, but was my butt in the chair? Was I paying attention and did I give myself the time? The output will come. What most people do is they sit down in the chair, they wait there for 5 minutes, nothing's coming. Well, let me just check email for a minute.
Yeah.
right? Let me just watch a YouTube video. Let me do some quote unquote research.
Yeah.
So they never give a chance for them to create the output because they're too busy distracted with other stuff. Because they're saying, oh, the muse didn't come.
Yeah.
You know when the muse comes? When you sit in the chair and do the work.
Right.
Day after day after day.
Yeah.
Because you know what happens. Like if you put a 2-hour writing session, you might have a good 30 minutes of this freaking sucks. I got nothing. And then just about when you're about to give up, you get an idea. After 30 minutes or 60 minutes or an hour and a half, doesn't matter. You get that idea and then eventually something will happen. So as long as you can put your butt in the chair consistently and give yourself that input of time and attention, the output will follow.
Right. So I shouldn't go for a walk in the middle and tell
Definitely
myself,
not.
tell
Definitely
myself
not.
that's
Like,
yeah.
really the only excuse is I got to pee.
Right. Yeah.
That's the one thing you really can't control. But no coffee, no walks, no let me just check this quick notification, none of that stuff. You know, okay, bio breaks, I'll give you an excuse, right? But then
Yeah.
come back as quickly as possible because that probably is out of your control.
Yeah. I guess like the next question I have, like throughout this, you've talked about the importance of scheduling your time and planning what you're going to do. But I guess like what is your specific time management advice and how do you actually organize your calendar?
Yeah, so this is where making time for traction is so important. So it starts with values. What are values? Values are attributes of the person you want to become. Okay, values are attributes of the person you want to become. So you've got to ask yourself, how would the person I want to become spend their time? And so what that does, so I give this framework of these 3 life domains. It starts with you. You're at the center of your 3 life domains. If you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people, you can't make the world a better place. So the idea is you look at your calendar for the week ahead. Okay, you look at your schedule and you put first and foremost time for you, for whatever's important to you. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your time. If you say to yourself, hey, you know what, part of my values is good health. Okay, I want to be healthy. Well, what does that mean for you? Okay, we all know how important sleep is, but do you have a bedtime? Right? I used to tell my daughter all the time, you need to get to bed. It's your bedtime. And then she said, Daddy, do you have a bedtime? And she was right. I was being a hypocrite because I didn't have a bedtime. Now I have a bedtime. If time to read is important to you, if time to play video games is important to you, if time for exercise is important, doesn't matter. Whatever is important for you, put it in your schedule first. That's the you domain. Okay. The next life domain is your relationships. Unfortunately, we have a loneliness epidemic in the industrialized world because the regular interactions that people used to have, that our parents and grandparents used to have with religious institutions, we know that the world is the industrialized world is becoming less religious, which means that they're giving up a lot of the regular social interactions around, church or synagogue or mosque, things that people can go to where they see others, right? And so it doesn't necessarily need to be in a religious context, but it is a fundamental human need to find relatedness. We need to understand others and be understood ourselves. And that doesn't happen, on its own. It doesn't happen spontaneously. You need to put that time for the relationships in your life that are important. So whether it's your friends, whether it's your significant other, whether it's your parents, your siblings, your children, have that time scheduled. Don't just give them whatever scraps of time are left over. Put it in your schedule if those relationships are important. That's the relationship domain. And then finally, the work domain, which is where most people start, but I actually think it's what we do last, because that's going to take the biggest chunk of our waking hours. When it comes to scheduling work, what you want to do is to schedule both reactive as well as reflective work time. What is reactive and reflective work time? Reactive work is how most people spend their work days. Right? We're reacting to notifications, reacting to emails, reacting to messages all day long, reacting to stuff because it's very psychologically comfortable, right? I don't want to have to think if I'm doing the right thing. I'll just do whatever my email inbox tells me to do. Okay. But that's, of course, terrible if you do that all day long. Now, some of your day is going to have to be spent doing reactive work, right? Reacting to emails, notifications. That's part of everybody's job. I get that. But you want to schedule that. You want to have that in your day, time blocked when you are available for reactive work. Now, what's even more important is to schedule the reflective work. Reflective work is the kind of work that can only be done without distraction. Planning, strategizing, writing, thinking, for God's sakes, has got to be scheduled. So it can be 20, 30 minutes. It can be 2 hours. It doesn't matter. Whatever you need for your particular job, but make sure you schedule that reflective work time and protect it. Keep it holy, because if you don't, I promise you're going to run real fast in the wrong direction.
And so throughout the week, how robotic are you with with following this calendar? Is it like to the T, or do you give some sort of flexibility with that?
So you want to try and follow it as rigidly as possible. Now, everybody slips off track from time to time. I still slip off track from time to time. The idea is that you learn from why you slipped off track so that it doesn't keep happening again and again and again, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that you reflect back on the week that passed. So every Sunday at 8 p.m., I have in my calendar time to time box the week ahead. And it starts with looking at the past week, and I ask myself, how can I make this schedule easier to follow? Not how do I become a drill sergeant and beat myself up and, I didn't stick to my calendar perfectly. No. How do I make the calendar easier to follow? So if I find that 2-hour writing block uninterrupted is too much, it is too much for me. Okay, well, how can I make it easier to follow? Maybe I'll do a 30-minute block and then do something else. Maybe do 30 minutes of email and then do another 30-minute block of writing. I don't know. Like, you can mix and match any way you want. But the point is you do not do that in the day. You do it in advance. Okay, once you set the schedule for the day and that day starts, that's it. You follow the schedule. And if you fall off track, you just get back to whatever is traction in that schedule as soon as you possibly can, as soon as you catch yourself. But you can alter that schedule from week to week or day to day as long as the day hasn't yet started. Okay, so over time, what you're going to do is, you're a scientist. What does a scientist do? A scientist makes a hypothesis, runs an experiment, sees the results, and then runs more experiments. And so every day, every week, you have an opportunity to run an experiment around, how can I make this schedule easier to follow? Maybe I'm more likely to work out if I try working out first thing in the morning, or maybe I'm a night person. I like to work out late at night, or right here or right there, or have meetings here or there. That's totally up to you. You have ultimate flexibility. The idea, though, is that once you set that schedule, you got to stick to it to the utmost of your abilities.
And do you just work off of your calendar, or do you have a to-do list that you also have? Do you also work off of?
So the to-do list is a temporary repository of the things you want to get done. Okay. The problem with to-do lists is that most people make this critical error of running their life on a to-do list, meaning they get to work first thing in the morning. They're not sure what they're supposed to do. They look at their to-do list and they do whatever's on the to-do list. Now, that's really stupid, because what most people do when they look at that to-do list, because it's not prioritized, a to-do list basically becomes a wish list, right? There's no prioritization there. It's an endless list of things I want to get done, So what happens is, what do? You do the easy stuff. You do the urgent stuff. You don't do the hard and important work you've got to do to move your life and career forward. So that's why running your life on a to-do list is a big, big mistake for many reasons, but that's one of them. So what you want to do instead, getting things out of your brain and putting them on a piece of paper, that's great. I also have a to-do list app where I dump things out of my brain and put them in the app. But that's step one. The crucial step two is to then make sure that is on your schedule. Why? Because then it forces you to make trade-offs. It forces you, because of the constraint of 24 hours in a day, you have to decide. Is this work project more important than spending time with my family, or going to the gym, or having good friendships, whatever it might be? That's a trade-off you have to make. Now, I'm not going to tell you not to, right? If you want to, if you're starting a company or you're working as an investment banker, you're going to work a lot of hours. And if that's a trade-off you're willing to make, fine. But do it with eyes wide open. Know that it's going to come at a cost of something else in your life. And that's totally fine, as long as you're doing it with intent. What you don't want, what many people stumble into, is somehow life gets away from them. Right? They wanted to do this, they wanted to do that. And because they didn't plan ahead, they didn't budget their time, they ended up with a life they didn't want, right? And a life that they know they could have made a lot better if they simply would have done what they said they were going to do in advance.
I would say most people, if not everybody listening, especially to this part of the podcast, they want to achieve more in life. They're like ambitious. They're probably an outlier amongst their group of people. And I guess like for those people who want to achieve more and want to become the best version of themselves, what would you say to them? What sort of advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the point of why I wrote this book. I wrote this book for me more than anyone else, right? I needed this for myself because I found that I knew what I needed to do. I just didn't do it. And that's the situation that most of us find ourselves in, right? It's not that we don't know what to do. If you don't know what to do, Google it, right? Like all the information is out there. We all know what to do. You want to get healthy, you exercise, you eat right. You don't need a diet book. You know basically what's healthy, what's not healthy. You know exercise is better than no exercise. If you want to have good relationships, you have to be fully present with people. If you want to, have a business, you need to work at it every single day, year after year. We know what to do. We just don't know how to get out of our own way, how to stop getting distracted. People don't stop and think, wait a minute, what kind of person do I want to become? Do I want to spend my time in a way that minimizes regret? Almost everybody can plan a day ahead and say, here's how I'd like to live my life tomorrow according to my values. I think that's really the point, right? Because the goal here is to be the kind of person that you admire, to be the kind of person that you look up to, right? In yourself. And the only way to do that is to plan in advance, how would the person I want to become spend my time, and act accordingly. That's what becoming Indistractable is all about.
Thanks for watching until the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, check out some of my other videos. I also have 2 other podcasts just like this one that you can watch immediately. If optimizing your life sounds like something you would like to do, then consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Let's get it.